right there, I don't know if you guys saw, but we just passed a bunch of activists for Black Lives Matter, and I didn't beat my horn, I didn't wave, I didn't do anything, and so I guess I'm gonna try to tackle this tough subject. It's not really that tough because it's just my opinions. But obviously, anything for everyone getting civil rights is good. I'm on board with that. Everyone should be treated the same. So that means equally. That's where my problems lie with Black Lives Matter, because right from when it first came out, I'd have these debates with my daughter because she's kind of really smart and really kind of astute and aware of sociology and just things happening around her, and so we would talk about this sometimes, and she'd bring it up, and I would say just that title comes from a place of negativity. It's coming from a place of like, hey, you guys, Black Lives Matter. I mean, I don't mean to state that like I'm making fun of it, but it is coming from a place of, hey, you guys, pay attention to our lives because they matter just as much as everyone else's. So it comes from like, assuming that no one else kind of gets this and understands that Black lives matter just as much as white, Asian, pink, blue, green, yellow, and that's so ever since it came about several years ago, I didn't like that it's coming from this, just the name alone is putting other people backed up in a corner. Just the name alone, Black Lives Matter, is in your face and insulting you before you find out anything else about the movement. So, now my daughter's fully on board with it. A couple years ago, she was just trying to understand where these people coming from, what's their mindset. Now she's, a college student, and as a typical college student, you're supporting this Black Lives Matter, and you're in these rallies that are like 85%, non-African Americans. And now another issue with the movement is I don't really see this systemic racism. And what I do see is extreme, in-your-face hostility and racism from one group, and that's the African American group. I don't see racism. I work in the ghetto. I don't see any racism from Hispanics. I don't see any other race down there. I only see Hispanics and African Americans. But I don't see any racism from the Hispanics that I work with. And I see just god-awful, in your face. I mean, sometimes the parent will show up for an interview, and if it's an African American parent, right when they see me, you'll just see so much, them being so displeased simply because of who they have to sit down with, it being a white person. So in my opinion, African Americans are the single most racist group in America by far, hands down, without a doubt. And it's so funny that they're talking about racism. So it's really, really difficult and really, really sad what America's going through, and that white people in America now are like the lowest on the totem pole. And it's not fair, it's not right for one group to call out another group and then for that group to just be hated. Like when I go into convenience stores and there's yesterday, I went into the gas station on this ride to get gas, and there were two African American girls, like in their low 20s, maybe 22, 23, and they were totally blocking the entryway. There was no way to get into the establishment, period. So I said, excuse me. They had their backs to me. I said, excuse me. One of them leaned forward to grab something off a concession stand, and that gave me enough room to squeeze by her. So I squeezed by her. They both start stating racial epitaphs towards my back as I'm walking towards the refrigerators in the back. And I've dealt with heavy racism in my face for over 26 years because I've had this job that long. So I just know you just act like you don't hear it. So I go get my refreshment. I get in line, and I happen to be in line right behind them. She stares me down and starts saying racial shit in my face as she's looking right in my eyeball. I didn't make eye contact. I just looked right through her and right around her. But that also happened in Point Furman Market. African Americans, same thing, blocking the entryway, completely blocking the entryway. I say, excuse me, very nicely, and she very rudely says, you're excused, here you go, you're excused, you can go right on by. And it's just like, it's just not necessary to have hatred towards anyone based on their skin color. It's so funny that they're complaining about racism, but they think they can treat white people any way they want, and it's okay. And now my daughter is supporting this movement because it's this movement that says you're allowed to treat white people any way you want. Basically, you can spit in their face. And I think with the air that we're in right now, if an African American spit in your face and you called a police officer and the gentleman was still standing right there, the cop, that's a felony, by the way. That is a felony. And I literally don't think the cop would arrest the individual. He would try to get you to see that, you're privileged, your father was privileged, your grandfather was privileged, and his father was not privileged, his grandfather was not privileged, his great-grandfather was a slave, and you need to allow him to spit in your face whenever he feels that is the way to treat your privilege. So, I know I'm saying this extremely politically incorrect stuff right now, but, let's think about racism. It's a bad thing. It should not be supported. It should not be tolerated. We are supporting extreme hostility and racism from one ethnic group that is now supported by the group that they are demeaning and the group that they are hostile towards and the group that they have extreme racism for. That group is saying, yes, treat us poorly. Yes, treat us with racism. Okay, so I go down to Watts every single day, right? And I told my daughter that, now let's say the richest areas like Beverly Hills, if you had an African American going into Beverly Hills every day and spending his whole day there, I guarantee you he would be treated with less racism than me, this blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy that goes down to Watts every day. First of all, there's a lot of black people in Beverly Hills, living there, working there. One, because you have so many extremely wealthy black people from entertainment and sports that have bought mansions there. And you don't have a lot of white people living in Watts. You have almost zero in the whole city of Watts. So now me going down there, they literally look upon me as like an alien. They don't see white people very often. You're not going to get that as a black man in Beverly Hills. I don't think. I could be wrong. But black people, in my opinion, are treated very well across all areas. Now, I live in a major city, Los Angeles. Maybe if I lived in South Carolina or Florida or Tennessee, Mississippi, I don't know, some of those steep south places, maybe I would be a little bit more of agreement. But now, back in 1985, I had one African American student in my whole senior class. It was a Catholic high school, and he was elected president of the student body. Now, that was about 80% white people, and probably around, maybe 15% Hispanic, and maybe 5% Asian or something like that. But you didn't have but one black person. Now, if 80% back in 85 were 80% white, and we all voted for this one African American to be our student class president. That goes to show you that all the way back in 1985, white people weren't racist. It's all just so tiring. I've even seen an African American newscaster say he's so tired about talking about race in this country every day. That's all he's able to talk about. And really, from 1985, where I saw no racism amongst my white friends, all the way to 2020, that's 35 years. And how are we going backwards? We're not. It's only the perception, I think, of African Americans, and using this as leverage to get as much freebies as possible. Now, here's another example. In the 90s, in like 1990, I tried to be a fireman. I was told no. And I said, why not? They said, for 7 years, you can't be a fireman. I said, what? Why? Because you're white. And so affirmative action was taking place, and you were discriminated against if you were white in several civil servant type jobs. That's pretty hardcore. That's discrimination. That's reverse racism. Way back in 1990, I was not able to pursue my chosen career simply because of my skin color. And now you never hear affirmative action mentioned, when for 7 years you had African Americans getting slots in college and universities over their counterparts that were of different ethnicities simply because of their race. They got good careers out of that. They got to be my bosses. They got a lot of good things, and you never hear about that. Leave a comment, hit like, dislike. Thank you.